Haley and this is the House for Hosting, and today we are going to be doing a DIY project that I'm very excited about. So the house that we're in does not have a fireplace in the living room, and I feel like it just looks really plain and bland and it needs a fireplace. So we're going to start a fireplace DIY project today, and I want to say a special thank you to Touchstone Home Products for sponsoring this video. Touchstone Home Products is a family-owned business based out of Pennsylvania that's been established since 2005, and they have electric fireplaces, mantles, TV lists, and lots of other accessories to meet your fireplace needs. I am thoroughly impressed with not just the products that they have, but the company and the customer service. So before I even started this, I called and I had several questions, and I immediately got a human, which to me was huge. And after the conversation with that employee, I felt a lot more confident and capable to embark on this DIY and work with this company. And I'm so glad I did, because like I said, their products are amazing. The fireplace is beautiful. So I can't wait for you to see it. Please, if you haven't already, click that subscribe button and let's get right into it so you can see this fireplace and how this turns out. So as you can see, the before of our living room desperately needed a fireplace. We just had the TV hung and the wires were showing, and it just didn't feel right. I've seen people do like a console table and the TV, and I think that looks good, but for me, we have just always had a fireplace, and so I felt like that was the center point of the living room, and it was something I really wanted to do. So that was my driving factor to start this whole project. Now, initially, my husband and I contemplated, did we want to frame this ourselves or hire it out? Being that it was so close to Christmas, we opted to actually hire this part of the project, and I'm glad we did. I think we definitely could have framed it. It didn't look that hard after the fact, but they obviously are the professionals, and so they did it a lot faster than we could have. Like, they came and had it framed up in under 2 hours, and there's no way me and my husband could have done that. After the framing, I had an electrician come to wire a dedicated outlet for the fireplace. I just didn't want to run the risk of having the fireplace on with the heat, it causing any tripping or anything else, and the outlet that we already had was connected to several other things on the circuit. And again, electricity is something that I'm not going to DIY, so I hired the professionals for that as well. And then after that, we did the drywall, and my uncle actually helped me hang the drywall, so shout out to him. He did an amazing job. And then once he did the drywall, he did the mudding and all of that. Obviously, I wrapped my Christmas tree in the plastic because I was not going for a flocked tree this year. And if you know, drywall can be a mess. However, he ended up doing a technique called wet sanding, which drastically cut down on the mess. If you are having drywall done in your house and that's something that they can do, I would recommend asking for that, because honestly, I didn't even really have to wrap that tree. It was not much mess at all. But he did an amazing job on the drywall. That is one thing that I went back and forth on. Did I want to try myself or hire? And I actually had no clue that he did that until I was talking to him and he told me, and I said, well, heck, you can do it, let's just do it together. And so he came over and he knocked it out and did an amazing job, so I'm so grateful for him. He also added extra bracing for our TV, which if you're going to hang a TV, I feel like that's always something, at least for me, that I'm always scared of, because they're so big and heavy. Like, are the studs going to support it? Are you going to find a stud? And being that we were going from the ground up with this, I said, heck, we know exactly where the TV is going to be. Let's go ahead and have it braced and ready to fully support the weight of the TV, so we don't have to stress that. And so he went ahead and cut the wood and installed that before he hung the drywall, and that helped tremendously. So I'm glad that he did that, and that really definitely helped with the weight and gave me peace of mind to know that the TV was going to be really secure on the wall. So if you're watching this, I would love it if you would leave a little note in the comments and let me know, have you ever done a DIY fireplace in your own home? And if you have, like, did you hire things out too, or did you do the entire thing on your own? I follow a creator by the name of Terry on Instagram. Her IG handle is Shady Grove Home. And I remember years ago, she was doing a DIY for a fireplace in her house. And that was actually the first time I had heard of Touchstone Home Products, because she worked with them. And I just remember them building it like from the ground up. They did the framing and the drywall and everything, and I was so impressed. And then she used the fireplace, which even more was impressed with their products. And it stuck in my mind since then. So that's how, whenever I started this project, I immediately thought of Touchstone, because I remembered how beautiful their products were and how good it turned out, and how good of a job that her and her husband did on their fireplace. That's another reason why I went back and forth with my husband. Do we want to try? Like, do we want to be true to the core, DIY, do it all, or hire some of it out? And I think that is the key sometimes when you're doing DIY is, do you try or do you hire? And there's times when you just go for it and you try. And when it's done, you're like, I'm so glad I did that. That wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And then there's other times where you're like, you know what? It's better to hire this out because you're saving time, your sanity, or maybe it's a safety thing. Like I said, there's certain things that I just don't feel comfortable trying to DIY. Electricity being one. Plumbing is something that there's probably some areas of that I would try. Bigger areas, I'm just going to hire out that kind of stuff. When it comes to like detail and woodworking and things like that, I feel like I can handle that, and that's something I enjoy to do, and I kind of like the challenge with that, which is why I contemplated the framing aspect of it, but I've never framed anything. I've seen it done tons of times before. We've built a house, so I was there through the whole process of seeing framing be done, but when you're not a professional, I wanted to make sure it was done right. I knew it was going to have to support the fireplace and the TV and the mantle, and so I said, well, this is something we could sit down and figure out and do, but again, it's so close to Christmas. There's already so much that comes with Christmas, between parties at school, and we have a child that's birthday is right close to Christmas, and so there's just so many things that already have enough stress. And I really wanted this project done before Christmas because I didn't have a place to hang my stockings. I mean, we have this little side wall and I could hang them there, but it just didn't feel right. That would be the first Christmas that even me and my husband, since we were kids, that we wouldn't have a fireplace, because he grew up with a fireplace and I grew up with a fireplace, and so it just, I don't know, it just felt so weird to not have one. So it's so important for me to get this project done prior to Christmas, so we could put the stockings up on the mantle and just have that center focal point. And I really cannot wait to sit down and watch Christmas movies with the fireplace on. But anyways, you're going to have to stay tuned, continue watching this video, because you're going to love how this turned out. Like, it looks so good. So next up, after the drywall is hung, I went ahead and painted it. Prior to me painting it this color, I actually primed it one coat. I had several people say, like, you're doing shiplap, you don't have to do that. But what they didn't understand was that I was doing a faux shiplap, and later in the video I'll show you exactly what that looks like and what that means. But essentially it's fake shiplap, and so I'm creating the look of shiplap without using that actual product. Now, if you're not familiar with shiplap, it is a wood material that's actually tongue and groove, so it gives that kind of space in between, but you don't actually see what's behind that. Which, if I was doing that, honestly, I could have skipped the whole entire drywall process and could have hung the shiplap straight onto the framing. But shiplap can be a little bit more expensive for that product, and so what I was going for was the same thing we had in our last house, which, if you're new here, you can head back to a few videos in the past and see our fireplace there was, I think it was like 20-foot ceilings that we had, and the fireplace went to the ceiling, and I did the faux shiplap on that, and it's a very modern chunky shiplap look. So what the sizing on that was like 16-inch boards in width, and I'm not sure if they make traditional shiplap in that size. If they do, it's probably extremely cumbersome and heavy and expensive, and so that was a much more cost-effective method, which I'm going to show you later in this video how I did that. But again, with that, you create your own spacing, and so you will see what's behind it. So it's important to properly prime and paint the sheetrock. Now I only had to do one coat. There was no reason to do 2 coats of this color, because with the spacing being small, you just see a little bit, so 1 coat did just fine. And the color that I chose is Ethereal Mood by Sherwin-Williams, which I'll show you that again in a minute. Okay, I'm going to catch you up to speed a little bit on where we're at now with this project. So we've done the framing and the electrical and the drywall, and now I'm going to be wrapping the drywall after I've painted it in my fake shiplap. So I've done this actually several times before. I don't believe I've ever even shown it on here because I started doing it long before I ever even had this YouTube channel. So I'm kind of excited to show y'all today a trick on, if you love the shiplap look, how you can get this look for far less than the cost of traditional shiplap. Also, with this method, you can customize your shiplap to be whatever size you want it to be. And for this project, I'm mimicking what I did in my last house, which I had 16-inch boards on the fireplace. And I don't even know if they make shiplap that large, but if they do, I'm sure it would be pretty expensive. So this is a much more cost-effective method. So I'm going to show you really quick what I'm doing and how I'm doing it so you can recreate this too. So you're going to go to Lowe's and you're going to ask for the 4-foot by 8-foot sheet of plywood, and it's pretty thin. It's about 1/4 inch thick. So it comes, like I said, 4-foot by 8-foot piece. You're going to have it stripped to the size planks that you want. I did 16-inch planks, so I was able to get 3 planks in 1 sheet of plywood, and I kept it at the full like 8-foot length. I just had it cut down to the 16-inch width, and they have a large saw there so they can cut it, and it creates a smooth cut. And then I sand it, and I have already painted, I can't flip it like this, I'll show you in the next clip, but I've already actually painted these boards, and I'm holding it up to the fireplace to get my exact wall measurement, and then I'm just going to cut this using my skill saw and then put it on. Again, I like this method because you can customize it to whatever size you want. If you want 6-inch or 4-inch or whatever you need for your wall or your space, and 1 sheet of these can range between 20 to 30 bucks, and depending on the size, you're going to get a good amount from that. So it's far cheaper than shiplap. And then I use liquid nails on the back and a nail gun to attach it. Super easy, super simple, much more cost effective. So prior to hanging the shiplap, it is much easier if you go ahead and sand it and paint it. And what I'm doing here is I'm just going around and sanding all the edges. They were cut at Lowe's, so they're a raw edge, and you don't have to sand really hard because they're pretty smooth edges as they are, but sometimes you just get a little bit of splitting in the wood. So I'm just kind of going around and sanding every edge, every corner to make sure it's all smooth and exactly how I want it to look. And then after that, I'm going to start by priming all of my boards. I forget, you'll have to look at the sticker. There's a sticker that tells you which side is the back and which one is the front. I've used this wood for years for many different things. We used to actually do like the wooden door hangers, and this is the wood we would buy and cut out the design, and we would paint both sides. So both sides really paint well, but one side will show the grain a little bit more. And so if you paint on the proper side and you prime it and then do your color, you're not going to see any of that grain, so it gives you that really solid, clean look, just like you would on your regular shiplap. Now another trick is mixing Floetrol with your paint. I've gotten to where I do this every time I paint, because what that's going to do is it creates a thinner consistency in your paint, and it helps it lay better, and it actually makes the drying time last longer. And the reason that you would want that is because it creates an airbrush look. So I've never like sprayed paint, like I've used can spray paint, but like actual spray gun and paint. But I love the look of that. So when people have things spray painted, you don't see the rolling marks, you don't see brush strokes. It just looks really, really good. And because I've never done that, years ago, I learned that you can mix Floetrol in your paint, and it actually gives the same look. So when it dries, it looks like it was sprayed. So what I do is I will kind of brush it on and then back roll it with my roller. But mixing Floetrol to your paint is the way to go. Just a little bit goes a long way. Like I've had that one bottle for a while now, and it doesn't change the color. So this is a darker color, and I was curious if that was going to make the paint lighter because Floetrol is actually white, and it does not change the color at all. So if you've never tried that technique and that tip, try it because it definitely works. So whenever I was painting these boards, the weather had changed and it had gotten so cold. And with our last house that we built, one good thing was it was in the building process and we didn't have flooring or anything yet. So I was able to actually lay out all the boards inside the house and paint. So it really wasn't that cold. But I can't do that now because we're in the house and we have flooring and everything. So I had to move these to the garage, and it was cold. Thankfully, I had a space heater going in there, which helped some, but it was really cold. And I thought that that might affect the way that the boards dried, but it didn't. They dried just as they normally do. It just made it really hard for me. My fingers and toes were like frozen by the time I got done, but I got it finished. And now for the fun part. So now that the boards are primed and painted, they are ready to be installed. And what I'm doing is I hold the wood up directly to the wall to make sure I get my measurements just right, and I mark it. And then I'm using my jigsaw or skill saw, whatever you want to call it, to do my cuts. And I just do that all the way up. I'm starting with the sides first and then wrapping it through the front so that you don't see that seam. And then when it's done, even that small little seam that you do have on the sides, I go back with the wood filler and fill that in. And I like doing this technique because it creates this wraparound look that's seamless. I have seen a lot of times people do shiplap and they'll do like a corner trim piece or a side trim piece. And I mean, that's fine, it looks good. But for me, what I really like is the just cohesive, no seam look. It just gives it a really clean cut, modern style. And so it's really important to me when I'm doing this technique to make my cuts as straight as they can be, as perfect as they can be, sanding it good, and any gaps that I do have, that they're super minimal, just small enough they can be filled with wood filler so that I don't have to do the trim piece. And that was the method I had throughout the whole process at our last house and this one too. And midway through, I was like, okay, it gets really hard when you're trying to make perfect cuts, especially with a jigsaw. If you've never used a jigsaw, you're freehanding it. And so it's so easy to slightly get off track or have a little waviness to it. And so that was my goal. That was my plan. But I knew that I wouldn't just leave it if it looked crazy. I would put the trim pieces on if I needed to. But thankfully, it turned out just like my last one did, and I didn't have to do that. The wood filler worked great, so I was very happy about that. But I don't know, if you're like me and you do DIYs, I say it's kind of like having a kid. So like you go through everything to have the baby, and you are going through all the pain and everything, and when you're in the middle of it, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm never gonna do this again. But then as time goes on, you forget that pain, and so you're like, oh, I can do that again, I can have another child. And I swear, like, DIY projects are the same way. When you're going through it, you're like, oh, this is horrible. It's so much harder than I thought it was going to be. Nothing's going right. And it's stressful. And you're like, I'm never going to do this again. But then when you finish and you look back and it looks good and time goes on, you forget about that. And you're like, oh, I can do that again. Until you do it again. and then you're reminded. All right, so the shiplap is finally done being installed, and all of the little nail holes that were puttied with wood filler have been sanded. Thank you to my husband. I delegated that job because it was not fun. But it lacks one more coat of paint, and then I'll be ready to finally install the fireplace. And I'm so excited because it's looking so good, and we are so close to finally being done. So one thing that I haven't mentioned yet is the spacing on the boards. I said before how there's spacing between them so you can actually see the drywall behind that, which is why I went ahead and painted it. But what I'm actually using for my spacers is the wooden paint sticks. You can get them for free when you get your paint mixed. I always grab a couple extras because they make the great amount of space between. It ends up coming out to be like 1/8 of an inch. So, and you can have them, they're very easy. Like I would have one on one end and my husband would have one on the other, and that way I would know it was level and the spacing was good. So that's my little trick for the spacing. To me, I feel like it's just the perfect amount of space. If you wanted something different, you could use spacers like they do whenever you do tile and stuff, but the wooden sticks work perfect. And then I go back over it with one last coat of paint. Even though I painted it before, this is just one final coat because I did do the wood filler and it's sanded, so then it's fully ready and everything just looks so much more cohesive. And now we are finally ready for the main event. Finally, we get to set the fireplace. So this turned out being so much more easy than I could have ever imagined. I will say this is one part of the project that in the back of my mind the whole time I kept wondering, is it going to be hard? How does it work? And then my husband and I watched a couple videos and he did something that I never do. He read a manual and he was like, you know what? This is going to be so easy. We can get this done in no time. And so we knocked it out in like under 20 minutes. We had this thing set and working great. And I am so impressed with how easy this was. Honestly, like I said, I'm not one to read a manual. And that's something that I'll give my husband anytime there's something that has to be put together. And the first thing he does, he reads the manual and he can figure out anything. And so whenever he read it, he was like, this is going to be so simple. You just literally take the brackets out on the side and then you screw it in to your wood framing on the sides. And when you're done with that, you can put in your crystals, or they have like a faux like driftwood log, which I prefer the crystals because again, I was going for more of that modern look and I just feel like the crystals really do that. So you just put that in, and then when you're done with that, you set the glass on it. Now, one thing that we didn't realize was when you're putting the glass on, there are these little metal tabs on the front. And so initially it wouldn't really fit. And I was worried. I was like, oh no, did we not frame it right or something? And so I thought we were going to have to like cut it out more, like in the shiplap or something to make it fit better. And then thankfully my husband went back to the manual and he said, no, that's just the process. One little part of it that we missed. You're supposed to just bend them. So we just bent them up and then it worked perfect and it set right in there. Everything locked in place and it fit great. So if you're going to do this project, they offer like on the website, the rough-in measurements. It tells you exactly what it has to be framed to. And I gave that to my framer. So going off that, everything was perfect. The measurements are great. Everything fit perfect. It took no time to install it. And it looks so cohesive, so good. And it has tons of different features. Like you can connect it to Alexa or Google Home, and you can change the colors of the flames, the speeds of the flames. You can change the ember colors, which is the light under your crystals or your logs. All in all, I am extremely impressed with this fireplace. And of course, those are just your basic features. You obviously have heat too. So it is absolutely amazing, and I love this fireplace. Now that the fireplace is done, it is time for the mantle. So Touchstone Home Products also offers mantle options in various sizes and finishes. I actually opted for the unfinished version so that I could stain it exactly to what I wanted, which ended up being like a 4 different mixture stain combination, which I'll put that in the description of this video. It was something I was trying to match my flooring with the mantle, but also I feel like my flooring is a little bit darker than I wanted the mantle to be. So I wanted them to be like in the same color family, but just have the mantle a little bit lighter than the flooring. So I'll put that combination of what I ended up using in the description of this video if it's something that you want to try yourself. But the mantles that they offer are already built. They are put together. You have like a piece of wood that you put on your fireplace wall, and then the mantle hangs on that and just like hooks in place. Beyond easy, so easy. I was initially going to build my own mantle until I learned that they also offer mantles, and I'm so glad that they do, because this shortened my DIY project drastically. If I would have had to build the mantle too, I could have done it, but it would have added so much more time. And again, time was not much that we had for this project because of Christmas and everything going on. So I am so glad that they had this option. It is something that I would definitely do again in a heartbeat. Extremely easy process. I just love how this stain color combination came out. It just really complements all the grain in the wood from the mantle. And like I said, it's lighter than the flooring, but it matches great. Now for the final process of installing the mantle. They give you this wood piece that you put on, and I just made sure that it was level. One hard part for me was finding a stud. Since I have the shiplap on, I couldn't use a stud finder. Thankfully, I had taken pictures of the framing prior to putting on the drywall and everything that would cover it. So I was kind of going off that and figuring out where my studs were at, and then I just attached the wood there. They do give you screws and hardware with this mantle set. However, for me, because I had the drywall and the shiplap and I had to go through the wood as well, I ended up having to use longer screws just to ensure that it truly bit into the stud. But that was no problem. We had those in the garage. So I got it on, everything was level, and it was ready to put the fireplace in place. And once I did, it looked amazing. It turned out beautiful and perfect and level, and I was so excited. And now for the grand reveal. Doesn't it look so much better? It looks like it was meant to be there, and that's what I'm so excited for. I'm so happy with how this entire project turned out. Again, I want to say a big special thank you to Touchstone Home Products, because they made this entire DIY process much easier than I could have imagined, and the mantle turned out amazing, the fireplace turned out amazing, and it just looks so good and together. And now I get to finally sit down and enjoy my Christmas movies with my fireplace, and it's just so cozy and fun, and I love it, and the kids love it. And one feature I mentioned before that I really do enjoy is the fact that it connects to your Wi-Fi, and it's a smart device, so you can control it from your Alexa or Google Home, and my kids think that is super cool. So if you haven't ever checked out Touchstone Home Products, I highly recommend you do. Thank y'all so much for watching this video. Thank you again to Touchstone Home Products for sponsoring the video, and I have the link in the description below that will give you access to their website and show you exactly the electric fireplace that we used and the mantle, and you can look around and see what else they have to offer. Like I said, they have tons of beautiful products, and they are an amazing company to work with. And thank y'all again for being here and watching it, and I just hope that you have a great day and a good week. If you haven't already, click that subscribe button, and until next time, bye guys.